Nix Herrera, well-known makeup and airbrush artist, works with EBA a lot. I know when I work with EBA or Yarrow, we go do any kind of trade shows or anything. He's always talking about you and your artwork and all that stuff. And I've seen on one of our banners some of your work, the typewriter.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite one. Yeah, that one's a good one. But just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with it all.
Well, a long time ago, I was 17 years old and lived in Orlando, Florida, working, looking for a summer job. And there was a local haunted house that just got built. It's like $4 million haunt,
Oh
looked
wow.
like Castle Grayskull from He-Man.
Wow.
And I went there, applied, and I didn't get casted. And then we get through the second part of the casting, and they're like, "Oh, you kind of look like one of our characters." And it was a guy in an electric chair, and the whole gimmick was the lights go off, and then I'm painted to look like him, chase everybody out. And I was fascinated with makeup. Every day they would airbrush me, and I asked the makeup artist to kind of show me some of the stuff. And from there, it just kind of snowballed into, I don't know, 25 years later, something like that, of
Oh my gosh.
makeup.
Wow.
And it was just a summer job, 17 years old, and
Yeah.
just
Wow.
got hooked.
So how did you team up with EBA? Like, is there a story there? Or how did you discover them? Like, for
There
us, what's
is. And it's a funny story because a lot of people don't know it. They're like, wow, you've been with EBA for a long time. And I'm like, I kind of helped push EBA into what EBA is today.
hmm.
So also a long time ago, I think maybe 10, 12 years now, Yarrow, the owner of EBA, was at a face and body paint convention in Florida. And he had his booth set up, and they were selling airbrush tattoos and airbrush paints.
hmm
And I saw he was a new guy, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go check out his product. And then I tried it. The next day, I ran back to the booth, and I'm like, dude, you have an amazing product. And I told him I was big in the haunted house industry, and part of our issue then was that we would spend 20, 30 minutes doing this awesome, elaborate makeup, and then we send them to set, they come back, and then half of it's wiped off.
Mm.
And that airbrush paint is what was big in the industry because it was faster, it looked cool, but it was so expensive.
Oh, I
EBA's
see.
price point was really great. And he's like, gave me his card, and then we started talking, and we came out with a line of airbrush paints for the haunted house industry, picked out the colors and, you know, what I thought would be great for the haunt.
Yeah.
So it became a hit. We went to Trans World, one of the biggest Halloween expos, and we did great. And then from there, I was like, we should go and check out IMATS, which was a special effects, you know, beauty place. And I was like, it would do well there. So we went there, and then I told Yarrow about maybe doing alcohol palettes. Then we did the alcohol palettes, and then
Yeah.
it kind of snowballed. But one funny thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when me and Yarrow were talking about the airbrush makeup for the haunt, EBA, if people have worked with it, they know it has a scent, it has a sweet smell to it. And
Yes.
he was like, should we take it out? And I was like, no, it's great because people will recognize it. So it's funny
Yeah.
that in the haunt industry, people are like, oh, you have this monster sitting in your chair. And he's like, oh, it smells great. And it's because when EBA was doing airbrush tattoos for water parks, it had a sweet smell. And I was like, leave it. So now it's great. When you walk in the trailer, you're like, somebody's using EBA because it just smells awesome.
Oh, that's funny. Every time I fill the paints in the back of the warehouse, I always tell them, I'm like, this stuff smells like very distinct. You could
Yeah.
always tell when it's this. Yeah, same thing with the vibe. I think the water-based line, the
Mhm.
vibe smells distinct too. But that's funny that you mentioned that. I
Yeah.
thought that was just the way it is. Like, I didn't know you
No.
could take it out. I thought it was just like a byproduct of the ingredients. Like, I didn't know you could, that was an
Oh, I
option.
could be
But
totally
wow,
wrong too.
that's cool. No.
Yarrow's gonna be like, I did not see this.
So you mentioned that when you were working with EBA, you ran back to the booth. So what attributes about it really helped you out with any kind of like special effects stuff or just like makeup in general? What kind of caught you there?
What I noticed, the big part of it is that the opaque, how much and how well it covers, and then how
Mm,
well it flows through the airbrush. And that's one of the biggest things. A lot of the paints that I was using before then, um, they would clog in the airbrush. And I tell people, people are like, oh, EBA clogs in the airbrush. And 98 0.9% of the time, people's compressors aren't strong enough to siphon the paint to get
I
out.
see.
But
I
what's
see.
great about it is it doesn't dry in the airbrush. And what I mean by that is it does dry, but use alcohol, 99% alcohol to reactivate it. But some of the older paints, what would happen is once it dried, it turned into like a plastic. And then when you tried to spray it to the airbrush,
Oh,
there wasn't a way to reactivate it, so it would clog in the airbrush. So with
right.
EBA, it would just flow through nicely. And then
Mhm.
how well it was just to cover, it had really good coverage. Where a lot of the other ones were very translucent. You had to keep layering and layering and layering to get that like bold look.
Right. So when EBA was like reactivated, it would break down into its originally like fine particles instead of just clumping together, huh?
Yep. And a lot of people
Interesting.
that airbrush with acrylics, it does that. Acrylics will dry and it'll turn into that plastic, and then you can't
Mm.
spray through. Where with EBA, it's reactivated with alcohol, goes back to its original form.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah, I know that was something we always talk about is how like thin the pigment is.
Yeah. And
But
there was a lot
interesting.
of other airbrush companies back then, and now there's just a handful that are people's like go to.
Yeah.
And a part of it is just because they couldn't figure out proper formulas, or
Mhm.
they just couldn't stick with it. And EBA's product is just, it's great. So
So if you were like in a store then and you had to choose between like a pigmented makeup or like a translucent makeup, which would you choose and why would you make that decision? Like,
it's actually a great question. I always go with the opaque. And the reason being is that I can thin out, water down the opaque, but with the translucent, I can't make it more opaque. And that's one
mm,
of the great things with the EBA. It's almost like you're buying twice as amount of the product because you can use transluce to thin it out if you need a translucent color.
right.
So with me, I'll mix up the EBA product with a little bit of the transluce to kind of water it down if I need a more
Mm,
translucent look to it. So
cool.
and a
Okay.
lot of people don't know
So
that. It's funny. It blows my mind. People are like, "How did you come up with that color?" And I'm like, "Well, I just took this color and that color and mixed them." And like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, any color that's still in the alcohol-based line, you can mix together.
like you can do
Now,
that?
what? I just put the blast cap in and just start airbrushing. I'm like,
Yeah.
you can do that, but you can also just create your colors.
Then what makes Endura specifically? I mean, we already talked about a whole bunch of it, I feel like already. What makes Endura like your favorite for work on SFX? I know you helped develop the colors, the palettes, like we already went through how well it is in airbrush. Is there anything else that we missed?
It's the staying power. It's if you're doing a
Mm,
makeup and you're on set for 12 hours and the director's like, "Oh, we're gonna do close-ups," you're like, that it's
yeah.
still holding up. Or with other paints, and a lot of people don't realize it either, but your body's chemistry changes the way that paints work too. It's colors change a little bit; they'll start to set in a little bit with the alcohol-based paints. Like it stays really well. But then that's also the other part is people are like, will come to the booth and be like, "Oh, I love your product, but it just sucks to get off." And I'm like, but if you
Yeah.
have the proper removers, then it's not an issue. But we'll see people at the conventions for the haunt shows. They'll come back and they still have paint behind their ears and under their neck. They're like, "Dude, I scrubbed and whatever."
That's
Oh. And they're like, "I
that's
couldn't
such a
get it
funny
off."
story.
One
Uh,
story, I had this model I'd painted, and the next day she comes back and she's like, "I can't get it off." And I was like, "Well, what did you use?" And she's like, "I did what you told me to do. I took a shower." And I was like, "Did you use soap?" And she's like, "No, you didn't tell me to." Because that's the other part too. Sometimes people don't have remover, and I tell them like
yeah.
hot shower, washcloth, and soap. If you scrub, it'll come off, like it breaks down.
Yeah, that was my next question is like you work in such quantity and I've personally experienced this either I'll be filling a bottle and I'll spill either a little bit on my hand or especially the blood that we use that stuff anytime we're at a trade show or I put something on someone's hand just a little drop and let them try it and see how it dries and all that stuff they'll come back and they'll be like I can't get it out. It just won't get off.
First time I used that blood, we had just come out with it, and I had a demo and Yarrow gave me some blood. He goes, go ahead and try some of this. And I'm like, oh, cool, give it a try. Yeah. So I do this theatrical haunted house like burn, and I cover like half the head with blood, and then I start doing the charcoal powder. I remember I'm like pouring this on this guy's head, and Yarrow's in the back of the room, and his jaw is just dropped down. And I'm like, what? He's like, it's alcohol blood. And I'm like, you didn't tell me that before I went over there.
Oh, no.
The next day, the kid comes back, and he's got like these like balls of hard red blood. And he's like, dude, I was going to shave my head for you. I was like, I got more remover. We'll get it out. So now when I use it, I put it in these small henna bottles. So it's just a tiny little bit to.
Yeah.
But it's great because nobody really had a blood that was alcohol based that I know of. And I was like, well, why would you need it? I'm like, well, if you have a guy that's supposed to be boxing in a ring and he's got blood above his eye and they're doing take after take, you don't want it to keep spreading. You want it to stay. And then for continuity, it stays. So in those aspects, it's great.
Yeah, like really detail kind of work because you'll never have to like retouch it all the time or anything like that. And the thing I liked most about it when I tried it actually on my hand was that it stays in the shape of like fresh blood. Like it looks like it's fresh all the time, which is kind of interesting. It doesn't ever look matte or anything like that. It's kind of weird. But okay,
I like
cool.
that he's got multiple colors. It's not just the one.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, why do I need different colors? I'm like, well, when blood hits the air, it oxidizes and colors change. And I'm like, well, I'm like, well, if you have a zombie and he's been dead for a while, he's not going to have fresh blood coming out of his mouth. He's going to have old blood. And if you bite somebody, then you have the fresh blood because then you can see. They're like, oh, that's good.
Do you ever apply Endura with like a brush or sponge or anything like that?
A new technique that I saw somebody do on set recently is they take the small henna bottles. What they are, it's like a small pump bottle that has a little kind of needle tip. It's not sharp, but it's just a small. And what you do is you kind of squeeze it and the blood will come out. So if you're doing, let's say, road rash or scratches, you can just use that little bottle to just kind of draw your lines. You can find them on Amazon. And I just put one of each color into it. I keep it in my kit and then apply it that way.
So if you had to choose like a few colors from Endura that you just would never leave or head to a set or anything without, what would they be? Let's make it like 3 colors.
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and my basics always to have is black, white, and brown, because you've got your dark color, your mid-tone, and then your light color. So with those 3 colors, you can pretty much do any depth. When it comes to Halloween makeup, it's the bruise purple, charcoal, and vein blood.
Okay.
So those are my kind of haunt colors. They're more muted, but like the charcoal is not black, but it's dark. And then with the bruise purple is kind of that mid color. And then the vein blood is just that good, like, so like when people come to the conventions or the haunt shows, they're like, I have black, white, what are the colors? And I'm like, these 3 colors are great. And then for fantasy, there's the floral purple, light blue, and metallic blue. I'm sorry, the floral pink.
Oh, okay.
That one, like, it just pops. It glows under the black light. The light blue mixed with the floral pink gives you this purple color that's really nice. And then the metallic blue is just, out of all the metallics, that's the one that when I do like a fantasy makeup, I spray that on and people are like, what did you use? What is that? And I'm like, it's metallic blue.
Wait, when you say fantasy, like what do you mean? Like do you like some kind of like mystical,
like avant-garde? Yeah, like if it was a mermaid or makeup for EDC for their stage performers, and it's just like vibrant, wild colors. Yeah, it's like you're kind of going the opposite direction of your haunt people, and
right. So, like you want to bring the attention there,
Yeah. And those colors, like I said, that floral pink, that's the one that I'm like, oh, it's so hot. Like, it's just.
So what movies or sets, like, can you think of off the top of your head that you've used Endura on?
It's funny. It's not the stuff that I've necessarily done on film, but watching movies and being with EBA long enough, I can tell when somebody used EBA. Whether
Really?
it's tattoo cover up, blood, like I know their colors so well. I'm like, babe, that's EBA. And she's like, what? Like, she thinks I'm talking about the movie. I'm like, that's EBA. Like I can tell when people have used EBA, and I think that's the cool part. Is
It's too bad you can't smell over the television, because then you would
I
know
know,
for
right?
sure, right? Like when we talk about what your personal top 3 colors are. So, final question, what category of like EBA paints is just your favorite overall, and why? We've got like SFX, the skin tones. Obviously, they're going to be used for different purposes,
Right.
but and then the hair and beard. How often do you use the hair and beard? Actually, we haven't talked about that.
So it's funny because when Yoro came out with the hair and beard, he was like, you have these white streaks in your beard. Can we paint them and take a photograph and then use it for the sleeve that the palette goes into? I'm like, yeah, all right, Yoro, I'll do it. So 12 years ago, I had just 2 white streaks. I'm like, all right, we'll paint it black, and then did the photographs, send them over to Yaro, and it becomes the jacket for the sleeve. So every once in a while I would see it, but when you take palette out, it's not on there. So then now the new palettes, my picture's on there. So anyone that buys the hair and beard palette sees my face. And my friends send me photos like, oh, look at this guy. Like, but no one realizes that the black is painted out the white streaks in it. It just looks like me.
That's funny.
They're like, who's this guy? Why is he on there? He's got a beard. And I'm like, no, it's because we should have just painted one and then left the other. But so that one, it's kind of funny. It's one of my favorites just because of that.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite new product, well, not new products, but I think one of the new things that I really enjoy is the skin tones. And people are like, well, what are you using the skin tones for? Well, a lot of times on set, people show up with tattoos, and we have to hide their tattoos. And this is why the EBA, I think, is one of the best products for tattoo cover-up, is because it's so big. Like we've said before, it's a great feature to it.
Right.
And what's awesome is that you cover up somebody's tattoo who's had the tattoo for however many years, and they see their skin back to what it was before.
Yeah.
And they get so excited and in awe, especially if you like knock it out of the park, like flawless, and it looks good. It's like I pat myself on the back because I'm like, that was great. Because it's not easy. A lot of people don't realize like how difficult it is. They're like, oh, I just pick a color because that's my color, and then just airbrush it. I'm like, no, if you're doing something on someone's arm, the top of their shoulders, top of their arm is going to be a darker color than what's in the inside of the arm. So you have to kind of the color and fade it through, and then you have moles and freckles and
texture and all
texture. So it's like between using the Endura airbrush paint to cover the tattoos, and then I use the palette to add my life back into the skin tone. So I'm like working on coming up like my favorite colors, the most used colors, and then releasing that with EBA, because people ask like, and you also have like dark tones that goes a whole different direction, where you've got different colors. So there's a variety of colors, and I'm like going to pick my top, 8 from each, and then put that together.
Right. How often do you have to like mix colors to match skin tones?
Every single time.
All the time.
That's the beauty of it is that everyone's going to be so different in color. And then, if that person's out for the weekend and they come back and you have to, it's like it changes. And then lights change everything too. Those things where like, well, I'll do a tattoo cover up. People are watching me and they watch the tattoo just disappear under the airbrush. And they're like, what are you using? Now this airbrush paint, and I can see what you're doing. And like a crowd just kind of draws by, and it's pretty awesome. Like when it's done right, you're like, that is good. That is awesome.
Yeah, I would imagine if you were in a certain lighting and you got used to it and you can blend the colors that way, the moment you change that lighting and tried to do the same thing, it would look different, huh?
Yeah, I just learned the hard way. I had a friend that is a beard model, and he wanted to do a bald cap. And the lighting was off, and I'm like looking at the camera, and it looks one way in the camera, and then looking at it in person, it looked another way.
Yeah.
And then now, when I do tattoo cover-ups, I either try to go outside if I'm able to,
Okay.
and adjust there, or I bring my makeup lights with me, and these lights give you like a real view of lighting, like outdoors. So now it's like one of the key things. If I do an airbrush tattoo cover-up, that's like the first thing I pack in my kit is my lights, because the one that was just slightly off, and I was like, if I had my lights, it'd been perfect. So
Yeah.
because it's crazy. You'll be in the trailer, you'll do your tattoo, you're like, oh, this looks great. And then you go on the set and you're like, I can see a cloud of where the tattoo is supposed to be. The other part that I've also learned with the tattoo cover-up is you airbrush everything, so you neutralize the tattoo, and then you speckle into it. And then sometimes, well, the technique I use is a dye brush and just kind of, speckling the paint onto it.
Yeah.
But using the Pro Seal.
Oh, the Pro Seal. Yeah. Yes. To seal it.
Yeah. So the Pro Seal has a lot of alcohol content in it. So when I spray over it, it reactivates it, and then it kind of just melts everything together. So
it makes it look more natural.
Yeah. So what it does is I'll spray it heavy, and then it just kind of, the alcohol reactivates the airbrush paints and the speckling. And then when it dries, it just kind of blends it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you that's all the questions I had. Thank you for being here. It was a good time talking to you. It was fun. We had a lot of stories.
Yeah, you're always going to be like, that's not what happened. He's like,
everyone remembers something differently, huh?
Yeah.